Hey, Todd Hampson here. And listen, if there's one thing that I hear believers wrestle with the most, like genuine, bona fide believers who are dialed in and really trying to pursue the Lord, it's they're trying to discover their calling. So here's the question I want to propose today. What does our calling look like today, and how's that different than any other generation? And I want to unpack that a little bit. You read in First Chronicles 12:32 about a group of people known as the men of Issachar, and they're commended because it says they understood the times and knew what Israel should do. So they were dialed in, they were paying attention spiritually, physically, everything, kind of looking around what was going on so that they could know what action to take. Then, if you fast forward to the New Testament when Jesus was on the scene, we see that he rebuked the Pharisees and Sadducees for not understanding the time. Here, Jesus, the Messiah, the long-awaited Messiah, is standing right in front of them, and they don't even see it. So he rebuked them in Matthew 16, verses 1 through 4, if you want to read that. He talked about how they can read the signs of the sky, but they can't even read the signs of the times. And of course, he was pretty harsh to the legalistic, godless religious leaders at that time. But also, there's an account where Jesus was speaking to the crowds, and he kind of said the same thing. And you can find that in Luke 12, and it's verses 54 through 56. And I'll just read that because a lot of times Jesus is very, loving and gentle. You think about like a lot of his sermons were just full of compassion and that kind of thing. But listen to these harsh words. He says, he said to the crowd, when you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, it's going to rain, and it does. And when the south wind blows, you say, it's going to be hot, and it is. Hypocrites, you know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? And I don't have time to unpack all the ways, but there are a lot of things that they should have noticed about the time, a lot of things that theoretically could have happened had they known and embraced their Messiah. But it didn't. They rejected him. Obviously, he went to the cross, and that was all part of his plan. Again, that's a topic for a different day. But I wanted to point out the fact that he rebuked the Pharisees and the crowds, the general population, for not understanding the times. Um, and you might say, okay, well, that was related to the first coming of Christ, or the men of Issachar. That was related to something in the Old Testament. Well, if you look at the Olivet Discourse, which is found in Matthew 24, Luke 13, and Luke 21, it's Jesus's big end time discussion. It lines up perfectly with the first set of seals and the first set of judgments in the book of Revelation, and also a lot of signs leading up to that. But anyway, all that to say, his disciples came to him and specifically asked, Lord, what are the signs of the times? What are the signs of your coming and the end of the age? Now, if that wasn't something that Jesus wanted them to know about or wanted the church in general to care about or pay attention to, he could have paused right there and said, hey, don't worry about that. Just leave that up to me. You just keep doing what you're doing. Love people, tell them about me, reach people for Christ, and you don't need to know any of that. But he gave them an entire chapter worth of dense prophetic detail that ties in specifically with the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. So it's kind of like his apocalyptic end time speech, so to speak. Then in Matthew 24, he even followed that up with a chapter full of kingdom age parables that relate directly to the end times. So in other words, he didn't rebuke them. It is something we're supposed to figure out. As a matter of fact, Hebrews 10:25 says that we can see the day approaching. Now, what we're not to do is set dates. That's very clear in the Olivet Discourse. He says, no man knows the day or the hour. That's not for us to know. We're not supposed, if we focused on a day or an hour, we wouldn't get ready until that day or that hour. So the tone of the church age and the tone of the Lord's return is that from the first century to now, theoretically, at any time, the Lord could return, which, by the way, that's only possible with a pre-trib rapture, a rapture that could happen with no signs that precede it. And everywhere that he talks about his return, it's imminent, meaning it could happen at any moment. So that's only possible with the pre-trib rapture. So anyway, just a side note there. But anyway, that's encouraging because that means the rapture could happen today. It could happen before we post this video. I pray it does. There's There's not a problem in any of our lives that's not immediately solved by the rapture if we know the Lord. Um, but anyway, with that in mind, and with the fact that we know from first century writings, several of the epistles, or a few of them anyway, say that call the first century the last days. So the church age, the whole age of the church is the last days. It's the last era. It's the last period before the Lord's return. So with that in mind, we've got to be, if those are the last days, we've got to be in the last minutes, just chronologically speaking. Also, you couple that with the fact, and I've done several videos on this, so I won't go over each of them, but there are several lines of signs that are the stages being set right before our eyes. Again, we don't know the day or the hour. We don't set dates, but it's very clear that everything is trending towards what we read about in the book of Revelation with the tribulation period, chapters 6 through 19. So, and if the rapture happens before that, then his return is even closer. So what that does in terms of our calling as believers is we've got to step up to the plate and be end time influencers. And I'll unpack what that means a little bit. Influencer, it's kind of a pop culture term. People are hired to be social media influencers to sell products or services. If they have a big platform, they could sell just about anything. If they have voices listening to them, companies pay them to promote products and promote services or influence people to do a certain thing. Well, it's time for us to be end time influencers. And I don't mean trying to gain popularity for popularity's sake or trying to be cool and hip and all that kind of thing. I just mean every one of us as believers who understand the urgency of the hour and see these trends heading towards all things end times. We see the shadow of the tribulation period casting on us ahead of itself. We need to influence others to, number one, accept Christ as their Savior if they haven't. The Great Commission is still the Great Commission. It's still the key thing we need to focus on. But knowing we're deep in the church age and close to the return of the Lord, that should also light a fire under us to do that with a sense of urgency, to reach others for Christ, to not be ashamed to stand for the Lord, to not be afraid of what other people are going to think, to stand for the Lord now like we've never done before. Knowing that the Lord's return is on the near horizon, whether we're dying soon or whether he comes soon. I hate to be morbid, but in either case, in a few short decades, most of us are going to be with the Lord. So why not be an end time influencer? Why not leverage this moment to point people to Christ like never before, to boldly proclaim what he says, regardless of what heat we take on for saying it? And let's train ourselves. Let's equip ourselves to leverage the moment, to, maybe God's calling you to do a prophecy conference in your backyard or in your church, or to talk to people or to talk to your family and friends. Maybe you need some training. Maybe God's calling you to go to seminary or Bible college, or just take some online audit classes, or just read, set some goals for next year to read a certain number of books on a certain topic. Above all, maybe God is calling you to intentionally and prayerfully think about who you can reach with the gospel, who you can engage in conversation and talk to them about the brokenness of the world and the fact that you have a Savior that's coming one day to fix all of that. Who wouldn't want to meet that Savior? So there's ways we can engage this generation like never before because of the instability of the times, because even unbelievers understand this is a different time period. There's something different about right now. Not just in our country, but globally. Things are unstable like they've never been before, and we're more connected like we've never been before. So that gives us an opportunity to point people to the Savior, to a God who prophesied an ending, and it's all heading and trending in that direction. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride right now between now and when the Lord returns, and of course after the rapture, it's going to be a really bumpy ride. But all of that is prophesied. All of that is part of the plan, and we know that the world has to go through all of that in order for God to set things straight and culminate everything that we read about from Genesis 1 to the end of the book of Revelation. So, lastly, let's live with hope and joy. As believers, we know how it ends. As I often say, we have an empty tomb to look back on, an occupied throne to look up to, and an amazing future to look forward to. Let that vision of the future draw us to the Lord, cast vision for our own future and shed light on what our end time calling should be as an end time influencer. Now, pay attention because we're going to be sending out a lot of information soon about an event that Jeff and I, with the prophecy, one of the other pro of the Prophecy Pros team, have coming up that you're not going to want to miss, and it dovetails directly with what I'm sharing with you right now. I think you're going to be interested, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, be an end time influencer. Submit yourself, humbly submit yourself to the Lord's purposes. Ask Him to show you what your calling is in this generation and let Him use you like never before. Hey, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. I think it's going to encourage a lot of people. So if there's somebody on your mind you want to share this with, go ahead and send it to them. And again, please like and subscribe and whatever else you can do to kind of get the word out and help other people see this video. Take care. Talk to you soon.